So welcome to the SecureDynamics TechCast. With me, I have two guests. I have one former guest, Damian Chung, who is the CISO at Netskope. Welcome back, Damian.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
And thanks to Damian, who made the introduction to David Jemmett, who is the CEO at Cerberus Sentinel. Welcome, David, to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And let's start off with the topic that David, you and I were chatting about previously, which I think is highly relevant given the, what was it, Apple yesterday? So the list goes on and on about companies that are targeted, which is everybody. But really the question comes down to, like, let's say I am the head of security or I'm a SOC ops person. And if my company gets breached and my boss comes to me and says, hey, Ashwin, what happened over here? My guards go up because this has happened on my watch, and therefore, can I honestly do a postmortem and be without having the bias plane, without having the emotion plane? So really, how does a second pair of eyes, somebody coming in, especially when something as critical as this has happened, to be able to keep the emotion off the analysis and be able to make recommendations? So again, I know you're in the thick of things. So what's your experience been?
Well, most of the time, folks internally to the company don't have the credentials to actually do an incident response so that they can document it, have the process procedures, documentation, and then stem it and then remediate it. And do that with documentation that could be presented on a legal or prosecution side. That has to stand up in court. Really, the CISO did his job. Anyone can get breached. I always say, what does Amazon, Google, Experian, DOD, and NSA have in common? They've all been hacked, and they spend billions. If somebody wants to get in, they're going to get in. But the CISO, a really good CISO, should be able to call a forensics expert that has those credentials. Because was it an internal employee? Was it somebody externally that you can prosecute in the US? Does it have to go overseas? There's a lot of different aspects. The CISO would hopefully welcome an expert to keep that data so that it can be preserved properly for what needs to be done to prove the case.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, as a CISO, you want to leverage as many resources as you can, even if that's external. You may have a team internally limited based on resource time or even the ability to do some of these forensics against potential breaches. So bringing in third parties, that shouldn't be an admission of, hey, we failed, but just as another set of eyes, another set of resources that can help you in a scenario where you might be in a bind.
So David, again, given you've been in healthcare for a long time, as David, I know you have too. So taking this particular sector, which is obviously under a lot of stress right now, is anything unique to this particular sector that you have, whether COVID has taught us, things that have changed going forward in terms of, everything from patient data to vaccines. In fact, I was, Pfizer, Wall Street Journal today. They've had two countries where they've had fake vaccines being doled out, I think Mexico and Poland. So the point being, given such criticality over here, the stakes are a lot higher right now, right?
They're a lot higher.
Yeah, I think for, healthcare obviously is very, very critical, and it's been a target. So if you look at where we've been, especially with ransomware hitting various healthcare, historically, we just have not spent enough effort or resources in cybersecurity to begin with. And so healthcare as an industry has been playing catch up and trying to become more efficient.
And
go ahead.
If you look at the industry average with KLAS, Scott Holbrook, and you look at the data, healthcare is one of the least spend on IT, let alone cyber. And they're trying to budget to make that happen. Again, you can spend billions of dollars. If somebody really wants it, they're going to get it. The healthcare record is way more valuable than the credit card data. You get all that information from everything you've done in the past and your healthcare. They can impersonate some folks and get more information, and they're using that for their benefit, financially typically. So healthcare is still struggling to catch up, and it's a very expensive process. They initially had EMRs; they had to go digital. That put a burden. Now it's cybersecurity; it's another burden. So they're just getting overburdened with this and trying to protect our healthcare. It keeps them up at night.
I mean, you add those two together. So they're doing the digital transformation into cloud. So, it now becomes like my background, perimeters not a place. It becomes a shift in where your data is going, where your users are coming from. And especially with COVID and a lot of doctors even working remotely or support staff working remotely, it becomes an even bigger challenge, especially with, not knowing where your data is going or the data spread, as I call it.
So just expanding that particular conversation, going into sectors that don't have, I know, David, you mentioned, I mean, even IT spend is way lower than it's supposed to be. I mean, you talk about industrial IoT, you talk about other sectors, agriculture, for instance, where, and again, I mean, there's been little to no spend over there, and yet all of these are sitting ducks. So again, from a talent perspective, from a mindset awareness perspective and technology perspective, and how do you think we can and should ramp up to be able to prevent? I mean, I was talking to somebody in industrial IoT about a year ago, and he was telling me just turning down the RPM for the coolant in a power plant is enough. That's an attack. And if you don't have the analysis in place, you won't even know that the coolant is the blade is running slower. So is there a double catch up that you talked about here, both in terms of IT and security, to happen in other verticals? And if so, where does the spend come from?
The spend up until lately, the FireEye SolarWinds that affected the government and all different types of agencies really brought it to the forefront. We still haven't seen the repercussions of it because people are still using it and they're breached and they don't know it. The really root of the problem is it's been a black bag that no one can get any return on investment. You put more servers out, you've got a better company, right? You put your website out, but cybersecurity it goes into a box and you don't see it again. It's just burned out. Well, that's not really the case. But the systemic issue is how many places have zero job openings today that can't be filled? Security. And Gartner's saying it's going to be 12 to 13 million in the next 3 years. So who are the qualified professionals? How are we going to train them? And how do we get it up to speed? I think healthcare, financial, the government should, as they're starting to spin up cyber programs, we really need experienced people. We don't want them coming out of boot camp. We need the cybersecurity professionals. We need to start today to support the future. Because the question I have is cyber going to get any smaller than it is today? Watch any sci-fi movie. Who's protecting it?
So, Damian, again, given your role and where Netskope is right now, you kind of alluded to briefly, which is the transformation of these businesses going to the cloud at the same time having to understand cybersecurity. So, again, how have you seen different verticals be able to kind of embrace the double shift of cloud first and then the impact of that in terms of cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the maturity of the company, right? I think the ability to transform into cloud first is a difficult step in itself, but it can't be done unless you're thinking about security and protecting your data and your users. So really, it's that discussion we need to have. It's not just about getting to cloud, but how do we get there securely and be able to still protect our users and our data.
Got it. And David, final question for you is in terms of advice for smaller entities, and we talked about healthcare, we've talked about other verticals, but if you go to the SMB, I know, David, you and I talked about this in a previous conversation as well. So David, I'm going to ask you this one, which is, say, as an SMB, I've heard about a remote chiropractor. I don't know how he or she works, but there is something called a remote chiropractic. But the question is, there's a lot of data that's being collected, right? And you barely have the ability to understand, if I'm a chiropractor, that whether I'm going to have 5 clients this week so I can actually make my ends meet. And now I have to worry about data that's being collected over a virtual meeting. What recourse is there for SMBs, number one, to understand? Number two, where do they get the budget from?
Well, a lot of SMB, even middle And there's some enterprise manufacturing companies who never expect or even think about cybersecurity. Oil companies, the guys out on the planes digging the oil, drilling for oil. They don't think about it. The best thing to do is, if you're aware of it, they have to accept it's out there, which a lot of folks are not aware of what can happen. We do because we're in it. But be aware, there is CISO as a service that you can have an expert come out and take a part-time. You don't need a full-time person or a check. If you're a small chiropractor, let's take a look. It should take less than a couple hours to take a look at your infrastructure and how you're doing data. And then, an SMB that has 50 or 60 people, get a training course, make it more aware. It cuts out, 90% of the issues that they have. So CISO as a service, you got to make sure they're qualified, because there's a lot of folks in the MSP or MSSP market that say, we know cyber. Make sure they're an expert and they can do a thorough job and give you a plan. And if there's issues, a remediation plan that goes with it, and do it over time so that you can get to a better cyber posture.
Wow. Okay. That's great actionable advice. And again, thanks for your time, David. Thanks for your time, Damian.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is fun.